Hello and greetings. This is edition number 24 of Joy Sightings. For this podcast, I'm returning to the parables of Safed the Sage. William Eleazar Barton, who lived from 1861 to 1930, created the character of Safed the Sage, and the first published book of his parables dates from 1915. He was a prominent congregational pastor, and I believe that his parables were first published in the denominational Sunday school newsletter that he edited. These short parables soon became a popular and widely distributed feature in a number of periodicals, eventually reaching an audience of over 3 million readers. He graduated from Berea College in 1885 and received his master's from Oberlin Graduate School of Theology in 1890. He married Esther Treat Bushnell of Johnsonville, Ohio, in 1885, and they had 5 children. Esther is given the name Keturah in Safed's parables. They had 4 sons, and the frequently mentioned daughter of Keturah was named Helen. Barton was also a noted scholar on Abraham Lincoln. His published writings are very extensive, as you can see online. I found it fascinating that the Congregational Library and Archives in Boston, Massachusetts, has 5 linear feet of materials from Barton, including sermons, letters, and photographic materials. And those include lantern slides. I think it would be fascinating to see these things. Before we begin, I must warn you that part of the charm of Safed's parables is his use of King James English. A Parable by Safed the Sage. The Curves and the Tangents. I rode in the cab of a locomotive, and I spake with the man who drave the engine, and we went at high speed. And high speed is one thing from the rear end of the observation car, and quite another thing from the cab of a locomotive, and it giveth a man the impression that he is not running a sewing machine. And I looked out upon the track, and I spake to the engineer, and I said, Behold how many are the curves, whereas the map which this company doth print with its timetable doth shew the road to be a straight line, joining every great city in America to every other great city. And he said, That is how it looketh on the map, but to the engineer every railroad is a double system of curves, the curves on the surface and the curves up and down. A railroad curves to get a better approach to a bridge, or to enter a town, or to avoid a swamp or an hill, or to go around the land of some farmer who tried to sell his land at 4 prices. So there is a curve to the right and a straight tangent, and then a curve to the left. And sometimes there is a reverse curve with no straight tangent between, in which case the passenger doth think unkind thoughts of the engineer without knowing why he is jerked galley west. Believe me, the business of running an airship like this is something more than opening and shutting the throttle, for there are always the curves to pull around and see around, and thou dost never know what doth lie in wait around the rim of the curve, or how strongly the train will be tempted to disregard the curve and survey a new tangent of its own. And I said, What is the other system of curves? And he said, No roadbed is level. Even in a prairie country, the roadbed descendeth to a little stream, and ascendeth to a little hill, and then descendeth to a larger stream, and ascendeth to a larger hill, and it must all be considered in terms of coal consumption, and steam pressure, and the weight of the train, and the conditions of the track, whether it be dry, or wet, or frosty. And I said, Thou hast many things to trouble thee, that I wot not of. And he said, Passengers mostly think that all an engineer hath to do is to keep the train between the fences of the right-of-way, and get in on time. Behold, they consider not the curves of either class, for a railway is not all straight tangents. And I considered and said, Thy business is like unto mine. For there be railroad men who think that I have only to stand in the pulpit one day in 7, and open my mouth, and the Lord will fill it. Behold, there are curves as well as tangents on my right-of-way, yea, reverse curves, and some heavy grades. And he said, I reckon it is so with every man's business. Though to another man it looketh like a straight line surveyed across the map, yet to him that is on the inside every business hath not only its tangents, but its curves. And we took each other by the right hand, and we bowed low and said our salams, and I bade him farewell and departed. For each of us knew that the other man's job was like his own. In order to see a listing of the podcasts in the Joy Sighting series, go to dailybiblereading.info and let your mouse hover over the new episode's menu entry. The link to the Joy Sightings table of contents will appear below that. To listen to more episodes in this series, whether from the website or from your DBRP listening app for your smart device, search for _ and a 3-digit number beginning with 0. The other episodes with Parables of Safed the Sage go from edition _001, then _002, and so on up to _011. Searching for _002 brings up 4 results, and the second Joy Sightings is among them. Safed the Sage's Parable, the Woodpecker. Now on a morning I entered my study, and I sat me down to read a book by a learned man on the uniformity of nature. And I thought much about the reasons why the heat that burneth a person on one day doth not freeze him on the next, and why the sun which riseth in the east a part of the time doth not rise in the west the remainder of the time, and why the law of gravitation, which sometimes pulleth the apple down, doth not sometimes hurl it up. And these studies proved a weariness to the flesh. So I opened my window for fresh air, and immediately there flew in a woodpecker. And no sooner was he in than he wished to be out. And he circled twice or thrice about my ceiling, and then flew swiftly toward another window, which was not open, and struck it with all his force, so that he fell on the floor and lay there as if he were dead. And I rose, and stood, and looked down at him. And I touched him not, but it was revealed to me that in his aching red head he was thinking thoughts like these. Behold, here too I have flown wherever there was transparent space, and have struck nothing. But I have been knocked down and well nigh killed while flying through space in which I could see plainly. Yea, and beyond were trees and the free air of spring. Never again shall I trust in the uniformity of nature, and the ways of the Lord are not equal. Then I left him and opened my windows from the top downward, and he rose and flew straight at one of them and was gone. And I, who am but very little wiser than he, meditated concerning those I have known who suddenly came up against a new experience which they were unable to catalogue among their theories of life, where something which they see not riseth up before them and layeth them low, so that they cry out in their anguish that the Lord hath forgotten to be gracious, and that his mercy is clean gone forever. For I have heard them think aloud, even as I heard the woodpecker with his aching red head. Now the uniformity of nature is the veracity of God. Yet God hath ways that are not as the ways of his creatures. So I besought my God that he would give me grace to trust him when I fly through what seemeth clear space and come up against something.